starting the Bhagavad Gita. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Chapter 1, the very beginning.
Yes, we are.
Okay. Coincidentally, I just heard a podcast. I don't know if you know the wisdom of the sages. If anybody, no? Okay. Okay. Anyway, so they
yes,
have like
I used to listen to it every day.
oh,
It's great.
okay.
They go through the Bhagavatam. It's great.
Yeah. So I don't listen to it every day, but I occasionally I do. And recently they had something that was like questions and answers. And one of the questions was from a younger, newer devotee who said, I have to admit, I just don't get Bhagavad Gita. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So they posed this question to Raghunath, one of the hosts. And he said, you know what? After 6 months, when I first moved into the temple, I also didn't get Bhagavad Gita. I couldn't relate to it at all. And then he explained that, if you're coming from a Western background, the first thing you see is the name Dhritarashtra. Well, there's no DRT sound in the English language, right? There's no such words. So, and then you've got this long list of names, Chikitena, the son of you can't even read the names, you can't even pronounce them. So how are you going to get into the Bhagavad Gita? You can't get past the first 3 verses. You literally cannot pronounce the names. So then what to speak of, entering into the philosophy. So it would be very discouraging, actually. This is supposed to be the most sacred text in the world. All wisdom is right here. And I can't even understand the first 3 verses. They make no sense to me. It's all these strange foreign names I can't pronounce. Anyway, I thought that was interesting because we're starting on the Bhagavad Gita now. That's just the names. So part of the explanation is that Bhagavad Gita is a small part of a great history, right? So if you're reading Mahabharata, by the time you get to Bhagavad Gita, all these names are personalities you kind of like are familiar with, right? They mean something. So Sanjaya speaks. I also just read that Sanjaya, so he's just like the most dedicated servant of Dhritarashtra, just loves his master. Dhritarashtra was a questionable personality, actually, in the Mahabharata, because of his behavior, right? He was actually the instigator of the war. You could say his son, but he was the guy in charge. So really, it fell, and the things that they did there, it fell on his shoulders. It was Dhritarashtra's decision. And in some places, it says that he was just plain ambitious. He resented the fact that he had been born blind and that his brother became the king instead of him, because he was the oldest son. He should have been the king. He was mad about it. To such an extent that his own nephews, not only did he try to politically outmaneuver them, he tried to kill them. They're under my shelter, and he tried to kill them. So Dhritarashtra is a bit of an anti-hero. But despite all of that, because Sanjaya, that's the first thing we hear is his name Sanjaya. Tell me about it, Sanjaya. So he was a very dedicated servant to Dhritarashtra. So you have to admire his qualities. It was Chanakya Pandit said, if there's one thing you can learn from a dog, it's to be faithful to your master. So that's considered a desirable thing. And of course, if you bring that over into spiritual life, that you're faithful to your master, your guru, then it's super desirable quality. But anyway, so Sanjaya was, and then later on, um, Dhritarashtra, after the whole war is over, uh, Dhritarashtra, he's lost everything, right? He's lost his kingdom, he's lost his sons, he's lost all the warriors, he's lost the battle, he lost his money, he's nothing, reduced to nothing. But in his mind, he's thinking, my nephew is treating me so nicely, I'm just like the king. Yudhisthira, out of a sense of duty, was treating Dhritarashtra so nicely. I like that small thing. Anyway, I lost it. So in that condition, his youngest brother, Vidura, comes and says, "What are you doing? You know, you're humiliating yourself, living that you've caused so much trouble to these people, and now you're living like a dog in their house." And in so many ways, Vidura starts talking to Dhritarashtra, and he tells him, "You got to leave home. This is way overdue." Just like in some places, Prabhupada says, at age of 50, you should take sannyas. Okay, so you can sannyas at age 50. I'm way overdue. Because Prabhupada says other things, like you should get 50% of your income for this service of Krishna. That's a challenge also. So, but anyway, Dhritarashtra, in terms of the society, especially at the time, was way overdue. But because of his attachment, he was so into the royal lifestyle, he could not give it up. So Vidura said, "Look, your teeth are getting loose, your eyes already don't work, your hearing's going, you're practically invalid, and here you are trying to enjoy the palace." He said, "Get out now." And it hit Dhritarashtra then. He's telling the truth. He's not just trying to embarrass me, he's actually trying to help me. The only reason I'm mentioning this whole background is because Dhritarashtra did take it seriously, and he left the palace. And the one way that Sanjaya said to do this, he said, "Don't tell anybody. Don't make a big deal out of it. Just go." And so the next morning, Yudhisthira is walking around saying, "Where's Dhritarashtra?" And so he goes to Sanjaya, because if anybody knows where Dhritarashtra is, it's Sanjaya. And he says, where are they? And Sanjaya said, "I don't know. He didn't even tell me. A whole life of service I gave to him. And he leaves and doesn't even say goodbye, doesn't even tell me." But that is the way of detachment. At a certain point, that's what happens in this world. We do say goodbye to everybody and everything. But still, Sanjaya was really hurt. But getting back to the Bhagavad Gita now, here we are. Dhritarashtra is asking Sanjaya, because he can't see, so tell me what's happening there. And then Sanjaya has this wild mystic power that he can visualize things that are happening somewhere. So try that, see if you can pull that one out. But Sanjaya can. So he's telling Dhritarashtra play-by-play announcement, what's happening at the battle. He can hear what they're saying, and he can tell Dhritarashtra exactly what's going on. So he wasn't just a common servant, right? He had mystic power. So he's sharing this with Dhritarashtra, telling him. And so that's how the Bhagavad Gita begins, with all these names that to the uninitiated are meaningless or difficult to pronounce. But they're actually personalities in a greater story. And when he's mentioning them, then you understand that the greatest warriors on the planet are coming together for this battle. So therefore, all these names are mentioned. So he describes it like that. And he said, first of all, your son he talked to Dronacharya, who was on his side. He said a little bit sarcastically, just look at all those, look at that army trained by you. And he mentions the different names. Then he says, but never mind, because on my side, here's the list of personalities that are going to fight for me. And among them is the greatest of the great, Bhishma. And so really, it's not even a fight. Not only do we outnumber them, but we've got Karna and Bhishma on our side. So it's not really fair, but who cares? This is war. So to announce the beginning of the war, then it's such a beautiful thing even to imagine this scene, that they are, to begin the war, they blow on their conch shells, is to announce. So they're blowing and makes this shattering sound, earth-shattering sound. If you can imagine Bhishma's conch shell blowing. And then they all start joining together. All of Duryodhana's great generals, beating on drums, blowing huge loud sound. The war is about to begin. Look out. And then on the other side, Sanjaya is relating. Arjuna asks Krishna, his beautiful blackish chariot driver, I want to pull my chariot up. Let me see. What's all the noise about? And he sees, and then they begin to blow their conch shells. And it's interesting that the conch shells have names. Then you're thinking that these are like powerful leaders of the world. Their conch shell has a name. My pet conch shell. Krishna's, anybody, I can't even remember, what's Krishna's conch shell's name? I remember Arjuna.
Panchajanya.
Panchajanya. And then Arjuna's Devadatta.
Because he got it from Panchajanya.
That's right.
Yeah.
We should have just seen the story like that recently. But okay, so then they start blowing their conch shells. And it's also loud, and it's also tumultuous. And the sky is also shaking. But there's an extra element coming from that side that didn't come from the blowing of Duryodhana's soldiers. Some transcendent aspect to this sound, Krishna's sound. So when Krishna blows his conch shell, it can't be the same as anybody else. It's really transcendental. And Prabhupada explains that it just broke their hearts, shattered their hearts, the sound of this conch shell. Just like Kamsa, he knew some way, someday, somehow, that Krishna is going to get me. So when he heard this sound, then when they heard this sound of Krishna's conch shell, there was something about it that struck a sense of doom and gloom. But they were heroes, they were heroic personalities, so they weren't like totally lost and depressed. But nevertheless, it did have that effect. That, yes, was that a comment?
Sorry, I have a question about the conch shells, if I may ask. I thought they were blowing the conch shell to start the fight, but then they have the whole Bhagavad Gita. So do they blow another conch shell, or when does, like, the fight was interrupted for the Bhagavad Gita? So how do they restart the fight, or when do they start fight?
Like it's
Sorry,
just,
I know it's kind of technical.
well, obviously I can't answer with any authority, but I can tell you what I imagine. That it's a preliminary thing, because then they have to regroup and actually begin the fight. So there was time to speak. So they didn't just like, it wasn't like charging, the cavalry charging with their, blowing their horns and waving their flags, running into the battle. It was more like a formal announcement. This war is commencing today. Get ready. So then the actual fighting, there's no description I know of. Maybe in Mahabharata it's there. Who is the first guy to shoot the first arrow? I don't know. But we do know that after blowing the conch shells, that's when Arjuna took a serious look and thought, hold on, this isn't worth it. It's too much. I'm not going to fight this war. I know it's a shock to everybody, but when I'm presented with the reality of what's actually going to take place here, I don't want any part of it. I can't. It's just not who I am. And what is most compelling about Arjuna's reluctance, of course, is the fact that it makes perfect sense what he's saying. It is wrong. Everything that he says that is immoral, right? You can't kill your teachers. You can't kill your relatives. And there's a reason for it. And he gives strong reasons for it. That it's not just them I'm killing human society. If they're killed, all the generations in the future are so confused and messed up, it basically destroys human society as we know it. I don't want to be a party to that at any cost. Take my kingdom. If that's what they want, take it. Because, what is worth that? Destroying human civilization. So that's what's compelling about it, that it makes total sense. Who wouldn't sympathize with him? Except for that one single factor. And we see that Krishna is surprisingly not sympathetic to Arjuna at all. He doesn't say, yeah, you make some good points. He says, you're speaking like a fool. But anyway, so that's Arjuna's initial reaction. And that's how the chapter actually ends, that when he just says, war's off. You win. It's over. I will not fight. Take it. So that sets the scene for the entire Bhagavad Gita. That lays the groundwork. How Krishna what kind of arguments, what kind of logic, what kind of presentation can Krishna put forward that makes more sense than what Arjuna just said? And what it tells us, obviously, is that beyond morality, there is super morality. And that's a important concept in Krishna consciousness, because there's so many people in this world that are ethically correct and not at all Krishna conscious, not at all God conscious in the real sense of the term. It's possible to be a very righteous, moral, ethical person and not even be pleasing to God. Now, what to speak of transcending? So it's an important concept to embrace, the notion that Krishna's word is the final word. Krishna's desire. And Krishna's desire, because Krishna is so transcendent, his desire becomes available to commoners through the medium of Guru. And of course, ultimately, that's what Krishna does become in this text that we're talking about. He becomes the Guru to say what to do and what not to do, which Krishna later on will say, not knowing what to do and what not to do is a very undesirable quality possessed by those of extremely polluted consciousness, aka the demons. So anyway, that's how the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita kind of plays out. Everybody's gathered, they blow their conch shells. Arjuna surveys it and just says, No way. Okay, there's your first chapter summary as far as I go. Any other discussion, comments?
I have a comment. Can you
Yes.
hear me?
Yes, it
Yeah,
sounds like
okay.
transcendental conch shell.
Yes. Mundane conch shell. I've been listening to Bhakti Vigyan Goswami from Russia, and he explained Bhagavatam canto by canto, and he has commentaries of different acharyas like Sridhar Swami, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, etc. So what the comment he made, I never heard about it before, but he was mentioning it about the Bhagavad Gita and about the verse that says, when Duryodhana says, look at my army as immeasurable strength, because you have Bhishma, Karna, etc. But the word immeasurable in Sanskrit can have another meaning. It can also mean insufficient strength. And the Acharya explains that the reason why Duryodhana felt that his strength was insufficient is because he didn't have any unity in his army, because there was a lot of false ego. Like Karna didn't want to fight as long as Bhishma was fighting. Karna did not want to fight because he thought, I'm better than him. They didn't choose me. Forget it. I'm not going to help. And there was a lot of like quarrels amongst themselves. Whereas on the Pandava side, according to Maharaj and the comments that he heard from the Acharyas, on the Pandava side, the commander in chief was Drishtadyumna, and Drishtadyumna was not even the best fighter. Arjuna was better than him and all that. But they were fighting in a spirit of cooperation as Krishna conscious devotees. They're the sign of Krishna consciousness, they want to cooperate. So by cooperation, they were able to defeat the opposite side, were on the side of the bodily platform in their false ego, and they were not able to unite themselves. So they felt insecure. That's the comment of the Acharya.
It's interesting you mentioned this. Oh, okay. I have a comment after.
I never saw it like this. I never realized that. I was seeing everything like Yoginath sees it, which is they're like more powerful. They have better fighters, more powerful people. I didn't see the underlying problems, but the Acharya, they see that. They have a deep vision of what's going on. So when we rely on the Acharyas, we can see better. Anyway.
That's
I found it very, okay. I would say a comment and I have a question.
Okay, I suppose the obvious conclusion then is that, harmony is more powerful than brute force.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the point the Acharyas are making, is that unity is the force. And in the material world, everyone is disunited. But in Krishna consciousness, everyone wants to be united. And that's what Prabhupada said also, that if my disciple were united together and they follow my instruction, we can conquer the whole world in 18 days.
Yeah.
But because they're disunited, it never happened.
Damodar, you were saying something?
It's just interesting that you mentioned that, because I've been listening to the Mahabharata with my daughter while I put her to bed. It's very nice to hear that. I just heard stories here and there of the Mahabharata, but we're just it's the first time I hear it fully chronologically. And just yesterday, it was funny. I was hearing it's just before the battlefield, before the battle, and there was Bhishma and Dronacharya arguing for not doing war. And they were discussing with Duryodhana. It's like war should be the last option. You know, you should have diplomacy before, you should have that. And it's like they were really encouraging him not to go to war. And you really saw they were insulting each other. Karna also was insulting Bhishma, and they were kind of all doing that. But Bhishma and Dronacharya, they're like, okay, we're going to stay faithful to the crews, but our heart is not really there, you know? So that, like you're saying, there's no unity there. It was interesting to hear them argue yesterday. You're saying. I do have a question. Like by the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, it seems like Krishna has answered all Arjuna's questions, or like it seems like, okay, the Bhagavad Gita is finished. Like the Bhagavad Gita goes on, I'm like, why does he need all of that? All the, like, it just seems very awkward that it's on the battlefield, and there he's talking about metaphysics and like bhakti. It's just like, why?
It does seem a little bit out of context. As we imagine, it must have been like a extremely impassioned atmosphere. All these great warriors all assembled in one spot, ready to go at each other. So yeah, you would imagine the extremely impassioned atmosphere. But also, you know, when Krishna is described, oftentimes it says that he's mildly smiling. And the mild smile is because he is such a transcendent figure that even this scene, it's not too big for him. He's not overwhelmed by the situation. And of course, it's kind of he was telling Arjuna, but I've got my own purposes here, right? Krishna wants to establish Dharma, the highest Dharma, surrender to him. So the deaths of these people is going to be incidental to that. So Krishna has his own purposes. And so we have to assume that in the midst of that thing, Krishna, mildly smiling, is able to take complete control of the situation and execute his purpose, which ultimately is to pave the way for conditioned souls to rectify their lives. So, you know, why he does it in that particular highly dramatic circumstance, it's just the glory of Krishna. Even there, he can speak with clarity about all of the relevant issues of the conditioned soul from now through eternity, because that is really his purpose. He wants to kill the demons. He is so concerned with having things run properly, you know, because these other people were relatively religious people. You know, we hear of Jarasandha. He was an extremely pious guy in one hand, you know, very generous, respectful to Brahminical culture on some level. But in Krishna's eyes, he really wants Krishna consciousness to prevail. So, yeah, even there, it seems entirely out of context, but he can put everything on hold and take care of his business, which is the whole history. That huge book of Mahabharata is for this moment. This is what I want to get across. And not all this about going to heaven for this or that, or all these other side stories. That's all there for this very thing, which I'm about to speak. And I'm not going to let this war get in the way, because this information is going to be relevant for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So in that way, Krishna does what he wants to do, gets the job done. That's what I would say.
One thing also, there was no purports, it was just translations.
And Krishna can speak Sanskrit faster.
Yeah.
I've heard people that can speak the Bhagavad Gita very fast. They can do it pretty fast. I don't know if Krishna was talking like that, but you probably do the whole thing in 25 minutes if you're good at it.
Prabhu, I have a question about the predicament of Bhishma, especially his alliance and his pledge to the crown was so crippling for him that all along he was seeing the adharma is being done, but he did not choose to do anything. So was alliance to the crown more than taking the side of dharma?
Krishna showed Bhishma when he took up the wheel of the chariot and was going to attack Bhishma and maybe kill him. We don't know. But he showed him at that moment that my promise means nothing when it comes to the safety of my devotee. Yeah, I know I said I'm not going to fight, but promises are one level of religiosity, and he showed him another level. So he did show him, because obviously Bhishma had to be so conflicted in the whole situation. He loved these kids. He raised them. So he absolutely adored the Pandu's children. So he had to be deeply conflicted by the whole situation. And then, Krishna, in the end, absolved him entirely. Just like Arjuna was saying that this is an horrific thing, that no good will come of this. Well, even after the whole thing was over, Yudhishthira was feeling the same thing. No good has come of this. It's me. I have caused all this death. He could hardly live with himself. And so then Krishna arranged for him to speak to Bhishma. And in that kind of brought everything full circle. Bhishma is, in this sense, absolved from everything, because he gets to tell Yudhishthira, you had to go through so much. I'm deeply sorry. Of course he was, for that. But yeah, that was you could say that was a flaw in Bhishma's character, that faced with that decision, of course, it's Krishna's desire, and that's what he ended up telling Yudhishthira, that none of this could have happened except Krishna wanted it. But anyway, for our education, we could say that he made a bad choice, and Krishna showed him that. But because it was Krishna's plan, he absolved him in the end. But yeah, you have to see that Dharma is one thing, and perhaps there may be some super Dharma, as we mentioned before.
Thank you, Prabhu.
So many of the characters, so many of the personalities are like that. They are conflicted. Some are just out and out shameless rascals. Duryodhana seems to have no conscience at all. But the others, they were thoughtful men. They were Raja Rishis, and so they all had to be. But when it came time for it, believing that their side was right, let's fight.
There's a Jade has her hand raised.
Okay, I can't see my little arrow thing. I always like hearing from Jade.
I do have a question about text 40. It says, when irreligion is prominent in family, O Krishna, the women of family become polluted, and from the degradation of womanhood, O descendant of Vrishni, comes unwanted progeny. And then in the purport, it talks a little bit about how women are generally not very intelligent and therefore not trustworthy.
Uh-oh.
yeah, how am I supposed to take that? Like, I know obviously it's my ego, but I have a lot of feelings when I read that purport, and I'd like your thoughts on it.
That would be a tough one to take. Totally understand what you're saying. The thing is, this is my take on it, that sometimes you have to see a certain context. Like what Prabhupada says, on the one hand, we say it's absolute, it's perfect, it's coming from Krishna. On the other hand, we see that Prabhupada was a person that was educated in, around the turn of the century in a British India under certain circumstances. He had his own cultural definition and understanding of things, and also his own way of using the English language, which may be different from the way the English language is used today. So it may be that I see it that Prabhupada is not exactly saying how we might take that now, that women are, how did you say it? Not very intelligent and therefore not trustworthy. Because, and Jamuna would oftentimes point this out when she was living here in Sharanagati, that Prabhupada had extreme respect for his female disciples. He wasn't in the tiniest bit condescending in the way that in his attitude towards women. So he writes this. So you have to think, if you're trying to accommodate both things, here's a guru who absolutely adores and respects his female disciples, and gives them full responsibilities, oftentimes more responsibility than his male disciples, recognizing that they're smarter and more capable. So he did that on a practical level. But here in the purport, he's speaking a principle to show why this moral code is there. That if the female population is exploited and unwanted children are born, it's not a good thing. So there are low classes of men and there are low classes of women. And the low classes of men, the character that they exhibit does not represent their gender. And the behavior of low class women does not represent the gender of women. And yet you can point to it and say, these women are behaving like this, these men are behaving like this. So yeah, you can't let something like this drive a wedge into your faith in Krishna. That wouldn't be the desired outcome. And yet you do have to try to understand it. What is Prabhupada getting at? So what he's getting at, that this is a viable moral principle, that if unwanted children are born, if women are exploited and you have unwanted pregnancies, it's not good for society. So that much we can see. So those class of women, they would be untrustworthy. But then again, I would say that Prabhupada's use of that word is probably not, and I say this because in some place he said that women like to be raped. Well, Prabhupada, what the heck? Women like to be raped? And then you look in an older dictionary from his time, and it just means women appreciate the art of a charming man with his advances. Just like a man, enjoys the charm of a woman. So it has the word has nothing to do with the way it's used today. But you could quote it and say, Prabhupada said women like to be raped. So he's a crazy guru. But, it's absurd to conclude that that's what Prabhupada was saying. So I think in this purport, you have to do the same thing. The Prabhupada is obviously not saying that women are untrustworthy because he trusted them. So if he thought they were untrustworthy, why would he trust them? So it's another kind of meaning that, you have to look at it and think about it. Well, and like I say, I think he's just trying to draw out the moral idea here to help us understand the cultural context of Arjuna's hesitancy to fight. That was also a highly structured society where women did have a very, both men and women had well-defined, important roles to play in maintaining a well-ordered, progressive spiritual society. And if those roles are destroyed, then you get what we have today. You get Canada or Russia or whatever, where there's no sense of any of that. You just have basically spiritual chaos. So yes, those things, that statement is there. You can't pretend it's not there, but try to understand it in a slightly different context. That's how I would approach it. And that's how I do approach it when I see things that Prabhupada says that I don't think that that's what he meant. And in some cases, I'm sure that's not what he meant. So
Thank you.
thank you for your nice question.
I think Vishwadika Prabhu wants to speak, but we can't listen you, Vishwadika Prabhu.
There's also a Raj Das that has his hand raised, and I would also.
No, I can go after Vishwadika Prabhu. That's fine. She wants to say something.
Okay, you're the one speaking. Yes, Vishwadika Mataji?
Yeah, she's speaking, but we can't hear you. Actually, it's been a while.
She's unmuted.
Something.
She is unmuted. I don't know what's the problem.
Yeah, there is some.
Maybe her mic.
Well, how do you like that? Okay, well then.
She can listen us, that's for sure. But I think, yeah, she can listen us.
So she knows that we can't hear her?
I think so, yeah, because she gave up a kind of.
Yeah, she's been hearing the class. It's just her.
Go like this if you know.
Her mic is not working or something.
No, it's a nice class. I was first of all, I was reading the introduction of Bhagavad Gita. That's very nice. Instead of jumping to the Bhagavad Gita itself, and it's a very nice introduction that Prabhupada gives you, in which it actually tells you, many questions that people can ask. Okay, how do I believe? Where they come from? Oh, this guru is that. Because in India is full of gurus. Like, you go turn a corner and there are 3 gurus waiting for you. But what is important in Bhagavad Gita, that it's the disciplic succession. That's important. It's coming right from the sun god, like not 5,000 years ago. It's millions of years ago when it's coming. And then Krishna is just explaining it again to Arjuna because the succession was being lost. And the second point, Vyasdev gave this boon to Sanjaya. There's a big story behind that too, that he can see from far and he can listen from far, which was a very nice thing. And then third thing, the Mahabharata. This all Gita is in Mahabharata. It's a very small part of Mahabharata. So they say that Mahabharata is a gold ring, but Gita is a diamond on it. So this is how valuable the Bhagavad Gita is. Because when you have a gold ring, you say, oh, I have a gold ring. When you have a diamond ring, you say, I have a diamond ring. You never say, I have a gold ring with a diamond on it. You say, I have a diamond ring. That's where the importance of Bhagavad Gita is. This is a diamond for us.
Yes.
And a very nice thing about Krishna, he chooses to be the charioteer of Arjuna. But we should understand that there were millions of people fighting there. So how much noise was there? This is very important to understand. And they don't have some kind of switch at that time. Hey, go right, go left. So what Arjuna was supposed to do, he's supposed to literally kick Krishna on right hand side if he wants to go right, on left hand side if he wants to go left, and kick Krishna right in the back if he wants to stop. Now we know what Krishna is. He has created all this, but he still loves his devotee. That's what we should understand, how much he loves us. He's ready for anything for us. Being charitable of Arjuna. I really like a point of Ghosh Thakur when he is talking about being united. That's very important. We still see some new ISKCON centers going up. They say, okay, we love Prabhupada, but we are separate. This just means, what are they separate of then? They're separate of devotees. They just don't want the association. That's what they're saying very clearly. They like Prabhupada, so okay, if you like Prabhupada, what you don't like in ISKCON? Prabhupada clearly said, the devotee association, my books, this is what is the important, the pillars of ISKCON. But of course, it's a very important point that they are saying we love Prabhupada, but on the other side, they're not even listening to Prabhupada. So it's very difficult to say that I love you, my wife, but I don't like your food, or I don't like your behavior. But it's very two things, which are very contrasted. Damodar Prabhu said, why Gita? I think it's for us, for all of us, because we all know Krishna can do anything with his power. If he wanted to finish that war in 1 second, he would have done it in a second. We all know he lives in our heart. He would just give the heart attack to Duryodhana and to all the party. I think it's completely for us. We should understand that Bhagavad Gita, that 45 minutes that Krishna spoke, or whatever time it was completely for us, for all the humanity that was coming, because Krishna knew that Kali Yuga is coming. They will need this knowledge, how to guide their lives and how to go ahead in the life, right? So this is completely for us. That's the reason why Gita was there. Sri Ram Bhagwan, he's superior. He don't have to made a bridge, ask help of Hanuman. He could do it by himself. It's all the lessons that are being given to us. What a devotee power is, what how to go in life, right? There are so many lessons. Otherwise, they can just say, oh, end, and it's end. It's just and the wheel of chariot. Yeah, you said very nicely. It's again Krishna. Because what Bhishma said, that he made a will. He made this promise that he will make Arjuna, take some weapon. Now Bhishma is a Vaishnava. He's a good guy, actually. Bhishma is a Vaishnava. He's one of the 9, what do you call it? I'm missing the word.
Mahajan.
Mahajan. He's one of the 9 Mahajans.
12.
So,
12.
12 Mahajans. Missing the Mahajans. So Krishna, to take sake of his word, he did all this. We have to understand that too. He kind of helped his devotee because he's a Mahajan too. In the end, very nice question asked by Mataji, by Jade Mataji. You answered it very nicely. Of course, it's a very difficult question for any man to answer. But I think Prabhupada is more about women being more emotional. We all know women are more emotional. My mom is more emotional than me. My wife is more emotional than me. It's more emotion that's I think Prabhupada wants to say there. But I don't think he is disrespecting at that moment, because we have to see that context that he's talking about is also 5,000 years ago, where there is less media. There is is the context too. Respect of women for Prabhupada. I have a small story. It was in States when Prabhupada was in his kitchen, and some devotee girl, I'm missing the name, sorry about that. She came to help in the kitchen Prabhupada, and after some time she says, I need to smoke. And Prabhupada says, okay, go ahead and smoke, right? He didn't said, oh, I don't want you in my kitchen. No, he said, go ahead and smoke. And she goes and smokes. She comes back, and Prabhupada said, wash your hand. And she washes her hand, and she started cooking. She touches her, she had a skirt on her. She touches her skirt, and she was going to touch something. Prabhupada said, stop, wash your hands. So she touches her hair. Prabhupada said, stop, wash your hand. Before you touch anything, you just wash your hand. he was very polite to that girl who was actually smoking, you know. He could have said, hey, that's one of my rules, that I don't want intoxication. So he is full of mercy. It's just many times we can't understand some of the context, I think, you know. That's
Yes, well,
that's my point. Thank you so much.
the context for that one was that was before there was even an ISKCON.
Yeah.
Where there, it was just the very, 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 very beginning.
Very
And
old.
that was Janaki. That was Jamuna's sister. Anyway, Damodar, you had something.
Yeah, sorry, if it's okay, I would like to contribute something to the discussion about the position of women.
Uh-oh. Okay.
This nice, juicy subject. I know, but sometimes I speak to my wife about it. I just like to see her perspective and understanding of it and how she feels about it. Comes up sometimes, and it's obvious that, I mean, we're talking in the general sense. There's always exception, but there's obviously a different type of intelligence. Men tend to be more philosophical. Women tend to be more practical. That's why, you know, they can work well together in a couple setting. I mean, guys, we like to philosophize, we like to rationalize, but women's like, hey, what will be the practical application? You know, sometimes it's a different type of intelligence. But also, if we look in the way how women get exploited by men, sometimes it looks like they should have not done that if they were actually thinking rationally. But unfortunately, they might tend to think too much with their heart, or maybe they're sometimes putting too much trust in places there it should not be. And that's what this verse is talking about. It's about protecting womanhood in that sense. Not that necessarily they need to be controlled over everything, but they might need some guidance so as that they're not exploited. Because there's a lot of men out there who will say what women want to hear. They'll know how to exploit their sentiments in their heart just to get what they want out of them without actually caring. And women have to be careful for that. Like I'm in high school, I deal with teenage girls. The other day I was hearing them talk about this guy that's sleeping with all of them. You know, he goes around, he sleeps with her, sleeps with them, you know, and they're just like, but he's the one for me. He's the one for me. And I kept saying, don't you see he's a jerk? Don't you see like he's exploiting all of you? But they're just like, they're all attached to him, you know? Though they're like, he doesn't care for any of them. They're all thinking, he's the one, he's the one. So like, sometimes sometimes unfortunately, because they have a soft heart and can be very loving, it can sometimes be overwhelm the, not see clearly, sorry. That's just from the experience. And guys are less intelligent if they just want to exploit and want sense gratification out of women like that. They're also acting less intelligent, not like that. So that's my comment on that. And this is what this verse is talking about, is that unless you have elders there and you have a proper family structure there, then that family structure is meant to protect women, to make sure that, you know, you don't have unnecessary man just comes and exploit any women and impregnates them ultimately, you know. So women have to be careful of that, because ultimately the responsibility kind of unfortunately falls on them. The guy just impregnates her and kind of leaves. And this is where all this problem of Vana Sankara comes, is that men are exploiting women. And so therefore, if women are left by themselves without protection, they'll just be exploited. So I think that's also the context of this verse, you know. It's meant, the purpose of that is that we're talking about women need protection. I don't know, sometimes they don't like to hear that neither, but the reality is there. It is a reality. We might think whatever we want about that, But it is a fact that there's social problems because women are not protected.
I see the little
They're
yellow
left
hand by
understood.
Jid. Does that mean you have a comment?
I
Right.
really want to, can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you,
Yes,
Vishwadika Prabhu. Yes.
Okay. I really want to comment on this because I'm a woman. I have a woman's body. I'm not a woman, but I have a woman's body.
And
When
you've
I
seen
was
it
a
all.
new devotee, there was a Srimad Bhagavatam class where the verse was quite heavy on women. You know, I was devastated by the verse and by the class. So I was expressing this to my senior god sister, and she said, Vishwadika, to the extent that you identify with being a woman, to that extent, you will be offended by such a statement. And that really got me thinking. This is exactly where it's at. To the extent that we identify with these material designations, when we read Srimad Bhagavatam, we will be sometimes offended. There are many times where Prabhupada will glorify women and actually criticize men. He'll glorify women because they have a more devotional attitude or whatever. So we cannot be identifying with the body that we have. The body that we have is meant to serve Krishna. And also, it may be that materially women are less intelligent than men. Maybe they have less capacity for discrimination. Maybe because we're more emotional. I don't know why. I don't know all the answers there. But remember, it's not the quantity that counts. It's the use that we make of it. So a person may be very, very intelligent. Like, I forget, there's this one scientist, I think his name is Stephen Hawking. He's supposed to be materially so intelligent. And yet everything that comes out of that man's mouth is practically so stupid
His dad
that
is
it
not.
boggles the mind. So he has misused the great intelligence that he's been given. So it's not the quantity, it's the use that we make of it in devotional service. So when Srila Prabhupada says something like women are less intelligent, okay, I'm less intelligent. It's an opportunity to take a humble position, to accept, and to make the best use of it and offer that to Krishna. And then our less intelligence is not a drawback. It's just a material nature. That's it. So that's all I wanted to say.
I
We're going
recently
overtime.
listened.
Jade has
Oh,
another
we're-
question.
Okay,
Just one more.
okay. There's one more, but I see two hands.
Yeah, Anu
I
also
don't
raised
have
her
a
hand.
question.
Okay.
Uh,
Anu?
should I
Go
go first?
for it, Jade.
Mine is quick. I
Tell
know
us
No,
what
when
you
I,
Jade.
I know
So
when
you have
I
a
was
question?
growing up a little girl in the Indian culture, I've heard all this, I've experienced it, I've seen women for a few generations. But something that when I was growing up resonated in my mind was just simple, and they were very simple. I was just a little teenager, but it was very profound. My grandmother used to listen to Lakshmi Suktam in praise of goddess Lakshmi. And there they said that Lakshmi is the mind-born beloved of Vishnu. So if Lakshmi is the mind-beloved born of Vishnu, she cannot be imperfect. Secondly, every time when we went to the temples, we always, recited Radhe Krishna, right? Sita Ram. So the woman's name came before the Supreme's name. So the intention all along in our scriptures and in our bhakti bhajans and verses
was always given a superior position to her in this whole creation. So kind of that made me feel much better. And I just kind of kept that to myself always. It was just a sharing thought.
I recently heard a panel of 4 women doctors having a discussion. It was relative to the COVID vaccine. But these 4 women, they were like, they could be, I don't even know what language they were speaking. It was English, but they were obviously so much better educated, so much more intelligent than I am. So, you know, it would be ridiculous for me to say women are less intelligent. All I'm really saying is that I'm a proud fool and I'm using this scriptural statement to enhance my own prestige because, you know, I see lots of women who are like way more intelligent than I am. And then that's a fact. Okay, so I guess Jade gets the last word.
Well, just one more word. We have to remember that in spiritual life, the qualification is not intelligence. The qualification is bhakti, and bhakti is available to everyone. So there, it may be or may not be a material qualification or disqualification, but in devotional service, it's a very insignificant point. And actually, intelligence can be a big drawback. Someone who is very materially intelligent, that can be a big impediment in devotional service. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that it?
That's all I wanted to say.
I mean, is that it for the night?
Yes, we're overtime, which is wonderful. That means that we had a very inspiring discussion going. Thanks to Jade. Very good, Jade. Thank you for your inspiration.
You see,
Haribol.
Jade, you're a woman and you put a question which just bewildered all the Zoom session. So that's important.
Thank you,
Well done.
everybody.
Haribol.
Thank you.
I have to leave. Thank you, Yoginath. It was a great class.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Yoginath.
Hare
Thank you.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna,
Bolo.
everybody.
Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna.